Today, let's talk about a piece of recovery gear that most overlanders have, but you never see them actually use. That's right, I'm talking about these recovery boards right here, so stay tuned, guys. Welcome to Exploration Overland. My name is Zach, and as I stated before, we're going to talk about these recovery boards and how this is going to work, guys. Just like some of my other how it works videos, I'm going to give you a brief history on it, basics on how they get used, and then I'll show you a demonstration. However, this video is going to be slightly different in the sense of, one, we're in my backyard. It's a nice day. I decided to film this out in my backyard because it is beautiful, and also because all the trails are packed that are accessible, are packed with people. Everybody seemed to take like a 4-day weekend. So it was really difficult to find an area that I could film in that didn't have 1,000 people everywhere or side by sides blasting by me. So we're in the backyard. It's great. Taro is running around here somewhere. He's right over there hanging out. And you're going to hear some other little noises. I apologize, guys, but honestly, this is the quietest it's been in a while. But instead of showing you guys a practical thing, I'm going to show you clips from my other videos on how these things work, because I have used these. Despite what I said at the beginning, I have used these not just on myself, but to help recover other people in correlation with a bunch of other recovery gear. So without further ado, let's get into a little brief history about these things right here. What is the history of the recovery board, the traction board, max tracks? All these things all describe these right here. And not all of them look the same, but they all do the same thing. Now, the history of this begins back in 2001 by an Australian named Brad McCarthy. He was the editor of a 4x4 magazine in Queensland, Australia, and back in 2001 he found himself in a situation where he got stuck in the sand on a beach in northern Queensland, and he was racing the tide, and despite having all his typical recovery gear, he struggled to get himself out, and thusly came up with an idea that he wanted a piece of recovery gear that was simple to use, fairly easy, and could be operated by one person, basically by yourself. And so the idea of a max track, because he is the founder of Max Tracks, came to light. However, traction boards, recovery boards, the max tracks did not come to production or to the public until 2005. In 2004 he created a prototype. After doing tons and tons of testing, they created a prototype, and then in 2005 they came to life and have just grown in popularity since then. And Max Tracks was the original recovery board, and since then other companies, such as these ones, are from ARB. You have a company called Tread. There are so many different off-road companies that make traction boards that are either very similar to the design of the Max Tracks, or you have ones that look like this. It is your typical recovery board. It's a very strong piece of plastic, and they have these little nodules on here, which we'll get into here in a second. But they all do similar things. They're all designed to give you traction in a situation where you have lost traction. They're really good in helping you in the snow, in mud, or in the sand. They can also be a little bit of a bridge if there's something you got to get yourself over, or they're really great for leveling yourself out at camp. if your rig is not quite level, they can actually level you out, or you can just use a rock under the tire. But they have there are many different uses for them, but their main purpose is recovery. Okay, let's talk about these right here. So, as I stated before, these are a ARB recovery board or a tread board. ARB basically bought Tread recovery boards, though Tread recovery boards is still a thing of their own. They do have the little ARB brand on them, so that makes it more expensive. But these are basically a Tread recovery board. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you'll notice I have two different types of recovery boards on the side of the Jeep. One are gray, the other are these red ones. And the gray ones originally came from my dad, who used them on his property before he put gravel in in his driveway to his house, because he used to get in there, and if it rained, he would sink 6 inches into the mud, and he couldn't get his truck out. So he had those gray ones, which then he gave to me to use on the Jeep, and they've been there since he gave them to me, and they are well used. They got well used last year on Engineer Pass, saving that Tacoma. A little link will appear there for that video, but they got very well used, and they got a little beat up and destroyed, honestly, guys. Though these things are really tough plastic and they are very durable, once you start putting a lot of heat into it from the tires spinning, if you're trying to get traction, depending on the situation you're in, it can start to melt the plastic. In the case of my gray ones, we were revving the nuts off of that Tacoma to try and help it get up, just because of the situation that it was stuck in. It was a disaster. But we did get it out, and the traction boards took a beating, but they still work, so that is a plus. Now, back to these.
I got sidetracked.
As I was telling you guys, big piece of hard plastic. They vary in size. You'll have some that are like this big. You have some that are like here, and then these are sort of the biggest that you can find out there. And in tread boards, this is kind of the standard size. They're just this big, huge plastic thing that sits there. On one side, you have what they call the ramp. Let's take it like this. You can tell it's got this nice little slope that you are supposed to chuck up under your tire in the direction that you want to go, so that your tire can spin and try and grab onto these little nodules. These little nodules, they're not sharp, but they are a much harder plastic than the red material, and they are, they protrude enough that even with a mud tire and all-terrain things like that, you should be able to hook it in there and get some traction on your tire so it can drive up this to get you out. And that's why there's all sorts of different little grooves throughout it. You do have your grooves here, which helps if, sand, water, mud. It does help get things to flow. It also helps disperse some of the heat that may be generated when you are trying to get traction with these things. Now, the other end here, if I show you guys, they call it a shovel. So a Max Track, which I don't have any because they are more expensive than what I wanted to pay, but a Max Track, at both ends they kind of look the same. They both kind of have the ramp shape to them, but you can use them as a shovel to dig. With the tread boards, one side is more designated as a shovel just because of the way it looks. It doesn't have a little slope for a ramp, but this is a bit of a stronger material than the Max Track, so you can dig this into snow, into sand. You can try and scoop away mud with it. And basically what you're attempting to do is trying to clear a lot of whatever the obstacle is, sand, let's use sand for example, out of the way of your tire that is stuck, so you can try and then take the ramp side, shove it up under the tire, so you can then try and get traction to drive up onto it to get it out of the situation that you are in. That is the whole purpose behind it. That's why there's a ramp and a shovel with these boards. A Max Track is more designed to be, both ends are like a ramp and a shovel at the same time. Now, what is one of the differences between this and the Max Track? First off, you can get Max Tracks in just about the same length and width of these. Max Tracks have generally a few more sizes. You can get smaller ones, you can get ones that are kind of half this size, and then you can get full length ones like this. They are generally a little bit more flimsier, and when I say flimsier, I mean they just bend a little bit more, which can be very helpful at bending and forming so your tire can get traction on it. These don't bend quite as much as those. They do bend some, but not like a Max Track. It's not quite as simple, and Max Tracks typically have handles on the sides. These do not. These just have little spots where you can grip your hand into to hold it. Hi, bud. We got Mr. Taro right there hanging out with us. He's a little hot. He was just running around in the sun. Oh, buddy. Okay, scenario time. Because I like using scenarios in these videos to show you guys how these would be used. Alright, guys. I'm back there, as you can see. It is a winter wonderland in front of us, and this whole area is ice. Complete ice. But I'm heading back down because Jason rear end slid on him and buried itself in the snow. So we gotta pull cable. I should say he's gotta pull cable. And I'm bringing the camera along to videograph his shame. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Well, we're gonna see how these action tracks do.
All right. Okay, what we're looking at here is Jason's rig is completely stuck in the mud. It is buried up to the back axle and almost to the front axle. We have his action tracks, which are basically a replica of a Max Track board, shoved up under his front tires because his back tires were way too buried to try and get the Max Tracks under because we couldn't dig up the icy snow. But we were able to dig up the front here to stick the boards up under his tires as best we could. AE, he did it, not me. But we got him stuck up under there as best we could. Now we do have the winch ran to a tree so that he can use that to help pull himself out of the hole that he is in. But what he's going to do is just going to give it a little bit of throttle, see if he can get traction and pop himself out of the hole. Now what you're about to see is a fail, and it doesn't actually work. But if it would have worked, he would have been able to pull himself right up out of the hole. But instead, this happened. Well, he was giving the action tracks a shot, but it doesn't seem like they're gonna grab. So right there, guys, is a situation in which not only were we using a winch and a bunch of other different recovery gear, but we used the traction boards to try and get some traction underneath those front tires to try and pop it up off of the side so that it could go. Now, what do these things range from in price? They range from anywhere from about $150 for like baby Max Tracks to about $350 to $400 for full-size boards like this. And generally they come in a pack of 2, so you get 1 and 2 generally for that price. But they are not cheap in that essence. There's a lot of other recovery gear out there that is a lot cheaper, that works way better, but for the purposes of having something that can do a lot of different multiple things, guys, they're not a bad thing to have. They're not the most important thing, but they aren't terrible to have. Well, guys, thank you for joining me today in the backyard. I hope, hi bud, you enjoyed this video and it was a little bit helpful. I know it wasn't like some of my other how it works videos, but honestly, guys, it's a little difficult, especially now that the snow has started to melt here in Colorado, to go and put myself in a situation that those are actually going to get used. So it happens. But thank you all for joining me. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, guys, I have a goal of 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I know it doesn't seem like a lot to you guys, but it is to me. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Also, links are in the description to my other social media accounts. I keep those up to date on what I have going on, as long as I am in service. If I have no service, I do not keep it updated. But otherwise, I keep those updated on what I have going on, upload other things to it. So go check those out. Also in the description is a link to my Patreon account. Go ahead, if you guys want to get more exclusive content and things of that nature, you can go check that out. Otherwise, thank you all for joining me, and I'll catch you all next time out on the trail.